What if you suddenly lost everything? No safety net, no one by your side, just you against the world. It's a terrifying thought, right? But what if that rock-bottom moment was actually the start of an incredible new chapter? Stick with me, because this story might just change how you see your own struggles. And hey, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear what's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough. For me, that rock-bottom moment came on a gray Saturday morning in Detroit. I was sitting on the sagging couch in my rented apartment, the kind of couch that knows too many secrets and has seen too many tears. I remember rubbing my temples, a migraine brewing from the constant stress. My lease was up in 2 weeks. My savings account was a ghost. My part-time writing gigs were barely keeping my head above water, and the future looked like a thick, impenetrable fog. Then, a notification pinged on my laptop. Just another distraction, I thought. But the headline caught my eye and it felt like a jolt of electricity. Elon Musk announces new 7,999 Tesla tiny house. Finally release, free land and tax. My finger hovered over the play button. My mind was racing. Could this be real? A tiny house from Tesla for less than $8,000? And free land? It sounded like a late-night infomercial, a scam preying on people exactly like me. Desperate. But it was Elon Musk, the guy who builds rockets and electric cars, the guy who dreams big. Curiosity won. I clicked play. The video opened with Musk on a minimalist white stage, the iconic Tesla logo glowing behind him. He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious but hopeful. "We're democratizing housing," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the auditorium. "Everyone deserves a home, a place of their own. And we're starting here, with the Tesla Tiny House program." The on-screen crowd gasped, and I felt a similar gasp catch in my throat. This was really happening. Then came the details, the fine print that always holds the catch. Limited to the first 10,000 recipients in select states. Free land parcel in Nevada. Zero property tax for 5 years if you move by December. My breath hitched. Nevada. A desert. A world away from the damp gray of Detroit. But it was a chance. It was a lifeline. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was this a sign? A crazy, impulsive, maybe even foolish opportunity that I had to take? The application form was surprisingly simple. Name, current situation, a short essay on why you needed this. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my fear, and my tiny, flickering hope into that essay. I wrote about the dead-end jobs, the rising rent, the feeling of being trapped in a system that was designed for me to fail. I wrote about wanting more than just survival. I wanted a chance to build something. I hit submit, with a shaking hand and a feeling that was equal parts terror and exhilaration. For the next week, I was a wreck. I checked my email 100 times a day. Every notification sound made my heart leap. I started packing just in case. Old clothes, a few books, my laptop. It didn't take long. My entire life fit into 3 boxes and a backpack. My friends, the few I had left in the city, thought I was insane. Nevada? Based on a YouTube video, you're going to get scammed. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. But staying felt like a bigger mistake. Staying felt like giving up. Then, one evening, it arrived. The subject line was simple. "Congratulations, your Tesla tiny house application." I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so much I could barely open the email. There it was, an acceptance letter, instructions, a deed for a plot of land in a place I'd never heard of. Stardust Valley, Nevada. The deadline was real. I had to be there by December to claim the tax exemption. It was already late October. I sold my broken-down car for a few $100s, bought a one-way bus ticket, and said goodbye to Detroit without a single look back. The bus ride was a 48-hour blur of changing landscapes and sleepless nights. I went from the decaying brick of the Rust Belt to the sprawling cornfields of the Midwest, then watched as the world flattened out into the vast open plains, and finally rose into the dramatic peaks of the Rocky Mountains. As we descended into Nevada, the landscape transformed again, It was stark, empty, and beautiful in a way that took my breath away. It felt like landing on another planet, a planet where I could start over. When I finally arrived at the coordinates, there was nothing, just dust, sagebrush, and a few wooden stakes in the ground marking out plots. My heart sank. Had my friends been right? Was this all an elaborate hoax? Other people were there, looking just as confused and lost as I felt. We were a motley crew of dreamers and desperados, all clinging to the same crazy promise from a billionaire. We started talking, sharing stories. There was a teacher from Florida, a retired mechanic from Ohio, a young family from California who'd been priced out of their own state. We were all running from something, and running towards this shared, uncertain dream. Then, on the horizon, we saw them. A fleet of Tesla semis gleaming in the desert sun, kicking up clouds of dust as they approached. They rolled to a stop, and the back doors of the first truck opened with a hydraulic hiss. Inside was a marvel of engineering. A sleek, compact, folded-up structure, the Tesla tiny house. It was real. Within hours, a crew began unloading and setting up the houses. They unfolded like metallic origami, complete with solar panels on the roof and a Powerwall battery. It was incredible. Small, yes, but perfect. A kitchen, a bathroom, a living area that converted into a bedroom. It was more than a house, it was a self-sufficient life pod. My new home, number 77, was placed on my plot of land. I stepped inside and the door closed with a satisfying, solid click, shutting out the desert wind and the noise of the world. It was quiet. It was mine. I ran my hand along the smooth, white countertop. I looked out the panoramic window at the endless desert sky. And for the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was home. Life in Stardust Valley was a challenge. We were pioneers. We had to figure everything out. How to manage our water, which was trucked in. How to create a community from scratch. We held town meetings in the open desert, sitting on camping chairs under a canopy of stars so bright they felt close enough to touch. We started a community garden, learning to grow vegetables in the harsh climate. The retired mechanic, John, taught us how to fix things. The teacher, Maria, organized lessons for the kids. We were building more than just a collection of tiny houses. We were building a society. There were hard days. Dust storms that seemed to want to tear our little houses from the ground. Scorpions in our shoes. The crushing loneliness that can sometimes creep in when you're surrounded by so much empty space. But we had each other. We learned to rely on our neighbors in a way I never had in the city. When my water pump failed, John was there in 10 minutes. When I felt that old familiar fog of despair rolling in, Maria would show up with a cup of tea and just sit with me. We weren't just neighbors, we were family. I went back to writing, but this time it was different. I wasn't churning out soulless content for pennies. I was telling our story. The story of Stardust Valley. The story of a group of misfits who took a crazy leap of faith and found not just a home, but a purpose. I started a blog, a YouTube channel, sharing our journey. People were fascinated. They saw in our story a reflection of their own desires for a simpler, more connected, more meaningful life. Looking back, that day on the couch in Detroit wasn't the end. It was the catalyst. It was the pressure I needed to make a change. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you're truly made of. That tiny house in the desert wasn't just a shelter. It was a launch pad. It gave me the stability to rebuild my life, not based on what society told me I should want, but on what truly mattered: community, self-sufficiency, and the freedom to create my own path. Stardust Valley isn't perfect, but it's real, and it's ours. And it all started with a crazy headline and a single click. So what about you? What's your Stardust Valley? What's that one wild idea you've been too scared to chase? Maybe it's not a tiny house in the desert, but we all have one. Don't let fear keep you on that sagging couch. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you resubscribe for more stories from the edge of the world. Until next time, keep dreaming. My My name is Sarah Miller, and just a few months ago I was standing at a crossroads feeling two things so intensely they almost tore me apart: hope and disbelief. The hope felt like a lifeline, a rope thrown into the churning waters of my life. But the disbelief was just as strong, a cold, hard voice whispering, "How could this possibly work for someone like me?" You see, my reality was messy. I'd been laid off from my marketing job 6 months prior. My mom's health, always a quiet worry in the back of my mind, had taken a turn for the worse. And my dad, well, he's been long gone, a ghost from a life I barely remember. I grew up in a small, forgettable suburb just outside Detroit, Michigan. My mom, Linda, was the definition of a fighter. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads. By day, she was a cashier, her hands flying over the register. By night, she cleaned other people's houses, scrubbing away their messes while ours waited for her. When I was 12, my dad walked out. He just left. No goodbye, no explanation. He never came back. That was my first hard lesson. Life doesn't owe you a thing, so I learned to hustle. I learned to keep my head down, to work hard and just survive. That became my mantra. Survive. I made it to college somehow. I majored in communications because writing, for me, felt like breathing. It was the one thing that made sense, the one place I could build worlds that were better than my own. But halfway through my sophomore year, our little house got too quiet. Mom was beyond exhausted, her smile shrinking a little more each day. The light in her eyes was dimming. I couldn't watch it happen. So, I dropped out. I came home to help. I started picking up freelance gigs wherever I could find them, writing press releases for small businesses, churning out blog posts for pennies a word, creating social media blurbs that vanished into the digital void. It was a grind. I eventually moved into this cheap, cramped apartment after my roommate bailed. The rent was way too high for what it was: peeling paint, a faucet that dripped a constant, maddening rhythm. But I didn't complain. Complaining felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. And honestly, I had stopped dreaming. Dreams were for other people, people with safety nets and second chances. And then, one morning, everything tilted on its axis. I was scrolling through my phone, half awake, when I saw it. The Tesla tiny house announcement. It wasn't just about a cool, futuristic home. It was about a community, a new way of living, a chance to build something from the ground up. For the first time in years, a feeling I'd long since buried started to stir. It was the possibility of actual tangible change. Not just surviving, but maybe thriving. I remember telling my mom about it that morning, my voice buzzing with an excitement I hadn't felt since I was a kid. She looked at me, surprised, then her brow furrowed with that familiar worry. "Sarah," she said, her voice cracking just a little. "Free land doesn't mean free problems." She'd seen me burn the midnight oil too many times. She'd seen me get my hopes up, only to be knocked back down, frozen in place by circumstances beyond my control. She was just trying to protect me, to protect my heart from another disappointment. Later that day, I called my best friend, Nina. She's my anchor, the one person who has seen me at my absolute worst, and still believes in my best. I told her everything: the wild idea, my mom's hesitation, my own roaring internal debate. Nina was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Sarah, if anyone can make this happen, it's you. This could be it. This could be your ticket out." Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. A ticket out. Out of this apartment, out of this cycle of just getting by. But it was more than that. It was a ticket in. A ticket into a future I could actually build myself. But how? How could a girl with a mountain of debt, a sick mom, and a resume full of freelance scraps even begin to compete for something like this? The application process was intense, the competition fierce. It felt impossible. But that night, sitting in my tiny apartment with the sound of the dripping faucet keeping time with my racing heart, I thought about my mom. I thought about her tired smile and her endless sacrifices. I thought about Nina's belief in me, and I thought about that 12-year-old girl who learned to survive. Maybe it was time she learned to do more than that. Maybe it was time she learned to fight for a dream. So, With a deep breath and a prayer I didn't know I had in me, I opened my laptop. I started to write. Not for a client, not for a deadline, but for me. I started to write my application. I had to try. I owed it to myself and to everyone who ever believed in me to at least try. This is my story. It is the story of what happens when you re-push to the edge and you find the courage to jump, not knowing if you'll fly or fall. Stick with me on this journey to see if a long shot can actually pay off. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for being here. All right, let's break this down. By lunchtime, I was laser-focused, deep in application mode. I meticulously filled out every single box. Proof of income, or, lack thereof, my previous address, and a personal statement explaining exactly why I needed this tiny house. I poured my heart into it. I wrote about my mom, about the sheer exhaustion that had settled into my bones, but also about my dreams. I described how desperately I wanted a small space to call my own, a self-reliant haven powered by the sun and wind. Okay, maybe the wind part was a little dramatic, but you get the picture. And then, I hit submit. The waiting began. The days stretched into what felt like an eternity. I was completely glued to my inbox, checking my email obsessively, hoping for a sign. At my writing desk, I'd just stare at that relentless blinking cursor on a document filled with unpaid invoices, a stark reminder of my reality. The news wasn't helping either. I'd listened to podcasts where every other story was about the housing affordability crisis, and it felt like they were narrating my life. Every now and then, I'd glance at that Tesla video again, that little seed of doubt creeping in. Was this all just some elaborate marketing stunt? Was I a fool for even hoping? The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. And then, it happened. An email. The subject line read, Tesla Tiny House Program, Recipient, 2874. My heart started hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break free. I held my breath and clicked. Approval. I had been accepted. It wasn't a dream. Free land in Nevada, a 5-year tax-free period. The words swam before my eyes. What had felt like a desperate lifeline just moments before was now pulsing through my veins like rocket fuel. I was going to be okay. I stumbled out of my room to find my mom. The moment I told her, she hugged me so tightly, and I could feel her tears on my shoulder. I always knew you'd find your way, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We both just stood there and cried, tears of relief, of joy, of a future finally taking shape. Then she pulled back, squeezed my arms, and a laugh broke through her tears. But you promise you'll visit, right? I promise, I laughed back, wiping my eyes. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of frantic energy. I gave notice on my apartment, sold what little furniture I could, and rented a moving van. My emotions were a complete tornado, a dizzying mix of pure excitement, paralyzing fear, and a sharp pang of guilt. I was leaving everything familiar behind, my incredible mom, my friends, the very city that had worn me down but also shaped me. On the morning of my departure, I stood in the center of the empty living room. The floorboards creaked under my weight, like a final, drawn-out goodbye. Just then, my mom and my best friend, Nina, pulled up in a Prius, suitcases strapped to the roof ready for the adventure. I took one last look around, locked the door, and slid the key through the mail slot. A small, symbolic act that felt monumental. We piled into the car and headed west. As we drove, Detroit blurred into a watercolor painting in the rearview mirror. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was the one holding the pen. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. Video opens with a fast-paced montage of driving through different U.S. states, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, crossing the Mississippi River, and finally arriving in the Nevada desert. The music is hopeful and adventurous. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. You've been following my journey for a while, and today is the day. This is the culmination of a dream I've been chasing for years. We crossed Ohio, drove through the gray farmland of Indiana, then into Illinois, over the mighty Mississippi, and finally, into the shimmering desert plains of Nevada. My heart was pounding with every mile. I've never felt so alive. But then, we pulled up to the land plot. And honestly, my heart sank a little. It was just stark. A flat stretch of scrub and dust, a few juniper bushes, and nothing else for miles. The sign read, Tesla Tiny House Program, Parcel 2874. But the house, it wasn't there yet. I saw the worry on my mom's face. "This is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I could only nod. My pulse, which had been racing, slowed to a crawl. Was this a huge mistake? And then, in the distance, I saw it, a trailer kicking up a cloud of dust carrying my new home. As they unloaded it, it emerged like some futuristic pod dropped from space. It was silver, sleek, and these incredible solar-paneled wings folded out from the roof. My heart just skipped a beat. It was more beautiful than I had ever dared to imagine. Moving in felt like a dream. The desert wind whispered through the open window as I stepped inside for the first time. The interior, with its clean lines and autopilot-style interface, was glowing with soft white lights. It was an open-concept living area, with a compact kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom loft. I won't lie. I stood there and I cried. It was all real. That first night, I lay in the loft and just stared out at the stars. I've never seen so many. No city glow, no light pollution, just thousands of brilliant diamonds scattered across the black velvet sky. I felt so small, but in a good way. Hopeful. I found myself whispering into the darkness, asking myself, what's the one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? And the answer came immediately. My mom's belief in me. She's been my rock through all of this, but as I lay there, that little flicker of worry started to creep back in. What about power failures out here? What about zoning issues? What about being so far from everything and everyone? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I was determined to make this work. Change had arrived and I was ready for it. The first morning was magical. The desert air was cool and smelled of juniper and distant sage. I walked out of my little silver pod, coffee in hand, and stood on the tiny porch. The horizon just stretched on forever. No city noise, no neighbors mowing their lawns, just the gentle hum of possibility. Then, the logistics kicked in. This house is seriously smart. The refrigerator's inventory system synced up with the solar roof to optimize energy use. The main house interface, which looks just like a Tesla's dashboard, asked me to run diagnostics. I tapped through the screens, checking the battery level, the solar intake, and the interior climate. It felt like I was piloting a spaceship, not living in a house. I couldn't help but grin. This was my home, and I was both the driver and the passenger on this new adventure. Of course, my mom's voice was echoing in my head. Free land doesn't mean free problems. And boy, was she right. The first major hurdle came about a month in. I received an official-looking notice in my digital mailbox. The local county was questioning whether the tiny house met their permanent dwelling requirements. I was flagged for an inspection. My hands were shaking as I read it. My friend Nina was messaging me. "Is this a scam?" My mom called, her voice tight with worry. "Be careful, honey." And to top it all off, my ex-boyfriend Jason, who I hadn't seen in months, sent a text that just said, "Hey, congrats on the move. Want to come to Vegas for a night?" I just ignored it. I had bigger things to deal with. The day of the inspection was nerve-wracking. The county officer, a Mr. Green, came out. He was a stern-looking guy who wandered around the unit, tapped on the walls, and frowned a lot. My heart was in my throat the entire time. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Looks good." I almost collapsed with relief. But then he added, "But the documentation is missing on the utilities connection." My stomach just dropped. Without his final approval, I could be forced to pack up and leave. This whole dream could be over before it even really began. I asked him about the 5-year tax-free incentive that was part of the program. He just shrugged. That all depends on final approval. So much for smooth sailing. This is where the real fight begins. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. It means the world. If you want to see how I tackle this zoning board challenge and what happens next with my off-grid life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. See you in the next one. The initial thrill of freedom, that first taste of pure, unadulterated independence, it started to fade, replaced by a quiet, persistent ache. I missed Detroit. It wasn't the city itself. Not really. It was the little things, the symphony of my everyday life. I missed the sound of my mom's laugh, that full-bodied, genuine joy that could fill a room. I missed Nina's coffee shop, the smell of roasted beans and the easy rhythm of her shifts. I missed the simple, comforting sound of chatter on the sidewalks, the feeling of being woven into the fabric of a place. I missed feeling like I was part of something bigger than myself. Out here, in this vast, silent expanse, I felt tiny, insignificant. One night I leaned against the cool, silver wall of my new home, the metal a stark contrast to the desert's warmth, and I pressed a tear away from my eye. Was this a mistake? Had I traded one kind of cage for another, lonelier one? Just as that thought began to take root, a little glimmer of light appeared, not from the desert stars but from my screen. The online recipients forum. It was a digital gathering place for people just like me. Other people accepted into the Tesla tiny house program. Scrolling through the posts was like opening a window into a dozen different lives, all starting this same strange, wonderful journey. There were young women fresh out of college, dads trying to build a new life for their kids, freelancers who could finally work from anywhere, and retirees ready for their next big adventure. We shared photos of our new lives in miniature, dinners on little patios under a sky full of stars, the sleek lines of our solar roof arrays gleaming in the sun, screenshots of our satellite internet speeds. It was a scrapbook of our collective dream. Suddenly I felt less alone. We were a community, scattered across the country but connected by this shared experience. I took a deep breath and typed out a post. Parcel 2874, just finished the move-in. I hit send, my heart thumping. Almost immediately the comments started pouring in. You'll love it out there. Congratulations, you made it happen. Welcome to the club. We're out here too. Each message was a little burst of warmth, a virtual housewarming gift. My heart, which had felt so small and heavy, suddenly soared. I wasn't just a tiny speck in the desert, I was part of a network, a pioneer in a new way of living. And then, just as I was finding my footing in this new world, a ghost from my old one reappeared. Jason. A text message lit up my phone. He'd heard about my move. He thought, maybe we could try again. For a moment, I let myself sink into the familiar comfort of it. The memory of our inside jokes, the lazy Sunday afternoons spent watching movies, the feeling of his arms around me. It was a warmth I knew, a comfort I'd missed. He came to visit, and at first it was nice. But then the questions started. He asked about the tiny house program, not with genuine curiosity, but like he was assessing an investment. He wanted to know about the cost, the land, the tax benefits. His eyes scanned my little home, not with wonder, but with calculation. And then came the question that broke the spell. So when are you going to invite me to stay for a while? The hope I'd felt, that flicker of maybe, turned instantly cold. I saw it with blinding clarity. This new life, this home I was building with my own two hands, was just another asset to him. A cool story, a convenient weekend getaway. It wasn't about me. It was about what he could get from it. That realization was a turning point. All the warmth I had felt for him evaporated, replaced by a steely resolve. I had to confront him. I had to protect this new life. My life. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm doing this for me, Jason, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. His face, which had been so full of easy charm just moments before, hardened. Fine, he spat out. But don't forget who you were when you were with me. He turned and left, the screen door slamming shut behind him, the sound echoing in the desert silence. I sat on my little porch, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I told myself, this is good, I am good. This is what strength feels like. But the desert wasn't done testing me. Just as I was starting to feel in control, the next blow came. A storm rolled in, a magnificent, terrifying display of nature's power, and with it, the solar battery pack malfunctioned. My satellite internet went down. My world plunged into a quiet, absolute darkness. It was a blackness deeper than any city blackout I'd ever known, a complete sensory deprivation. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped me. I stumbled through the pitch-black house, my hands outstretched, heart pounding in my chest. I finally found the manual override for the system and managed to get a few emergency lights on. I even lit some real candles, their flickering flames feeling ancient and reassuring. My pulse was racing, but underneath the fear, something else was stirring. I felt alive, truly, vibrantly alive. The next day I got to work. I wasn't going to be defeated by a faulty sensor. I called the Tesla support line, and after walking me through some diagnostics, they confirmed the issue and shipped a replacement part. When it arrived, I watched a tutorial, took a deep breath, and fixed it myself. When the lights flickered back on and the Wi-Fi reconnected, I didn't just feel relief. I felt powerful. I breathed in the desert air, and it tasted like hope. But the biggest challenge still loomed. The county board's decision. They had to approve my building permit and land use. If they rejected it, I could lose the tax incentive that made this all possible, or worse, I could lose my home entirely. The hearing was held over a video link. I dressed in a simple blouse, trying to look professional and responsible, my hands shaking under the desk. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I moved here because I wanted a chance. I began, my voice trembling at first. I told them my story. I talked about my mom, about losing my job, about my dream of owning a home I could actually afford, a home powered by the sun. I spoke about wanting a life of self-reliance, of contributing in my own small way. My eyes welled up as I spoke, but I pushed through. I clicked end call and sat back, the silence of my tiny house deafening. The board took a break to deliberate. The waiting was agony. Weeks crawled by. Then one afternoon an email notification popped up. The subject line read, "Decision regarding parcel 2874. My heart stopped. I clicked it open. Approved. Full compliance granted. The tax-free period is confirmed. I read it once, then twice. I exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding for months. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me, followed by a surge of confidence so strong it felt like I could lift the house myself. I looked out the window at my home, this beautiful, resilient little structure. I walked up to the loft, my hand gliding over the cool steel railing. I leaned out, looking over my living area, my gaze stretching all the way to the distant horizon. I did it. Against all odds, I had actually done it. I had built a new life from scratch. The desert still felt vast and the land still felt remote. But for the first time, I didn't feel tiny or lost. I felt rooted. I felt home. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures. See you in the next one. Just when I was starting to get used to the solitude, a message pinged on my phone. It was from an unfamiliar number, but the words jumped out at me. We are rehosting a meetup of Tesla tiny house recipients tomorrow at Parcel 5621, 20 miles north. My heart did a little flip. A meetup? Out here? I hadn't realized there were others so close. Without a second thought, I decided to go. I threw a few essentials into a small bag, a water bottle, a jacket for the desert night, my journal, and hopped into the rental SUV I still had. The engine rumbled to life and I set off, kicking up a cloud of dust as I navigated the unpaved roads following the simple coordinates on my phone. The landscape was vast and unchanging, but my mind was racing. Who were these people? What were their stories? Were they like me, running from something or running towards something? After about half an hour, I saw it. A circle of familiar, sleek silver pods, just like mine, shimmering in the afternoon sun. It was like stumbling upon a secret futuristic settlement in the middle of nowhere. People were milling about, greeting each other with waves and warm smiles. There were families with kids chasing each other, single women chatting, and older retirees relaxing in camp chairs. It was a community. As I parked and got out, a friendly guy with a warm smile and a sun-weathered face waved me over from his unit. "Hey there, new arrival?" he asked. I nodded, feeling a little shy. "I'm Mark," he said, extending a hand. "Welcome. Come on in. Check out my setup." I stepped inside his tiny house and my jaw dropped. It was the same layout as mine, but he had completely transformed it. It was a high-tech remote co-working space. Multiple monitors were mounted on the walls, a sophisticated microphone sat on his desk, and he was live streaming, powered entirely by the solar panels on his roof. He explained he was a software developer and that this setup gave him the freedom to work from anywhere. It was inspiring. He wasn't just surviving out here, he was thriving. Later, I met a woman named Carla. She was a single mom with 2 young kids, and she had a completely different approach. Her tiny house was a cozy, vibrant home, filled with books and art projects. She was homeschooling her children right here in the desert, teaching them about the local ecosystem, astronomy, and self-sufficiency. "It's the best school I could ever give them," she told me, her eyes shining with conviction. For the first time since this whole crazy journey began, I felt a profound sense of belonging. I wasn't just some isolated survivor clinging to a strange new life. I was part of something bigger, a movement. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I felt like a pioneer, on the frontier of a new way of living. That night, we all gathered around a large fire pit. The flames danced and crackled, sending sparks up towards a canopy of brilliant, unobscured stars. The Milky Way was a vivid slash across the sky, more real and immediate than I had ever seen it. One by one, we started sharing our stories. It felt safe, intimate. When my turn came, I took a deep breath. I told them everything. I talked about Detroit, the cold mornings, the constant noise. I talked about the unexpected layoff, the fear and uncertainty that followed. I told them about stumbling upon the tiny house auction online, the impulsive bid, and the wild mix of hope and terror I felt when I actually won. And I told them about arriving here, in this vast, silent desert, and the joy of finding this unexpected community. They listened. They really listened. I saw my own journey reflected in their eyes. They nodded. They understood the fear, the leap of faith. It was a powerful, unspoken connection. Carla handed me a mug of hot chocolate, and I clinked it against hers. "To new beginnings," we said in unison, the firelight flickering on her face. In that moment, my heart felt so full it might burst. I thought back to that first morning on my little porch, consumed by doubt and second-guessing everything. Now all I could feel was pure, unadulterated possibility. But I knew, even with this newfound sense of community, that the journey wasn't over. This was just one milestone. The next trial was looming, and it was a big one. I had to make this life sustainable, not just emotionally, but financially. I had a dream of building my own remote writing business, but could I really pull it off from a tiny house in the middle of the desert? The night eventually wound down. I said my goodbyes, promising to be back for the next get-together, and drove back to my own little parcel of land under that incredible star-strewn sky. In my rear-view mirror, the circle of pods glowed faintly, a beacon in the darkness. My own tiny house was a faint, welcoming light in the distance. And as I drove, a thought crystallized in my mind, clear and certain. I'm not just running from my past anymore. I am actively, joyfully running toward my future. The desert dawn arrived gently, as it always does. I woke before the sun, a new energy coursing through me. I stepped outside into the cool pre-dawn air. The silence was breathtaking, a physical presence you could almost touch. On the horizon, the sky was beginning to glow with soft shades of pink and orange. My tiny house, my sleek silver sanctuary, its solar panels spread out like metallic wings, stood in stark, beautiful silhouette against the pale, waking sky. I took a deep, deliberate breath, filling my lungs with the clean, crisp air. I felt truly, completely alive. More alive than I had in years. I went back inside, lit the small stove, and put on a pot of coffee. The rich aroma soon filled the small space. I poured a cup and took it back outside, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. A light wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush. My thoughts drifted back to my mom in Detroit. The city would be waking up now, a symphony of traffic, sirens, and the general hum of millions of people. I thought of the life I'd left behind, the constant anxiety over rent, the dread of a high heating bill, the suffocating feeling of always being just one paycheck away from a crisis. And I thought of how incredibly far I'd come, not just in miles, but in spirit. Now, it was time for the next chapter. It was time to build my business. The satellite internet, which had been a bit spotty, was finally stable. It was time to launch Desert Desk Rights, LLC. Sitting at my small multi-purpose table, which doubled as my dining area in my office, I started sending out professional coffee shop-style invoices for Kuchik freelance jobs I'd done. I spent hours building a simple but professional website, showcasing my skills and my unique story. I began to network, not in stuffy corporate offices, but right here within this vibrant tiny house community. I talked to Mark, the developer, and Carla, the homeschooling mom. I listened to their stories, their needs, and their ideas. This community wasn't just a support system, it was my first market. I started pitching articles. I didn't write about boring corporate topics anymore. I wrote about what I was passionate about: remote living, sustainable homes, the future of housing, and the incredible Tesla tiny house movement I was now a part of. My personal experience gave my writing an authenticity that editors were looking for. And then, it happened. I landed my first big client. A major national magazine focused on alternative housing wanted me to write a feature story about my journey and the community I'd found. The pay was more than I used to make in a week at my old job. I was officially working, truly working, from a place I had once only fantasized about. I was building a career, on my own terms, powered by the sun, in the heart of the American desert. This was it. This was my new beginning. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. It means the world. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button. And if you want to see what happens next with my desert writing business and this incredible community, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one. For the first few months, life in my tiny house was a dream. The quiet desert, the sustainable living. It was everything I'd hoped for. Then, nearly 3 months in, came the greatest test. A late summer storm rolled in. I'm talking dark, angry clouds, howling winds, and sheets of rain and hail that hammered against the roof. The solar panels groaned under the debris. The satellite dish flickered in and out. The whole house, my tiny sanctuary, shuddered with each gust. I was standing in the living area, just watching the rain pound the windows, when an alert popped up on the autopilot home system. Battery low, storm in progress. My pulse just skyrocketed. I scrambled outside to secure the patio furniture, the wind throwing dust and sand into my eyes. In that moment, the house felt so small, so isolated against the vast, furious desert. For one long, terrifying night, I sat with my laptop, keeping the lights low to conserve power, just listening to the storm rage outside. A single thought kept looping in my head. What have I done? It was a tornado of emotions: fear, regret, a deep sense of being utterly alone. But then, I forced myself to remember. This house wasn't just some shack I'd thrown together. It was built by Tesla, to their exact specifications. The panels were rated for hail. The battery backup was designed for exactly this scenario. Emergency shingles were in place. With a trembling hand, I found the button on the control panel. Emergency safety mode. I pressed it, and just like that, the light stayed on. The house stayed warm. I sat there staring at the blinking battery indicator on the monitor. 12%, 11%. My breath caught in my throat. Then it stabilized. It started climbing. 15%. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. When the first morning light crept over the horizon, the storm had passed. I stepped outside. The desert floor was a mess, littered with broken branches and hailstones the size of marbles. But my tiny house stood there completely unscathed, shining in the new day's sun. I walked the perimeter, just touching the solar roof, running my fingers along the siding. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't just lucky. I was capable. I had faced the storm, trusted the technology, and come out the other side. Later that day, I had a very special visitor. My mom. She flew all the way in from Detroit. As we drove out on the dirt road under these impossibly blue skies, I saw her taking it all in. She walked into the house, touched the smooth countertop, looked up at the sleeping loft, and studied the solar monitor on the wall. Then she sat down on the little porch, looked out at the desert, and just exhaled. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. My throat tightened up. All I could manage to say was, "I wouldn't be here without you." We just stood there and hugged for a long time. It was a moment I'll never forget. That evening felt like a huge celebration. The whole community gathered for the official rollout of the Tesla Tiny House program, Edition 2.0. Even Elon Musk was there, announcing new features and the next locations for the project. I stood there, surrounded by all these incredible, forward-thinking people, and raised my mug in a toast. I thought back to the question that started this whole journey for me. What if everything changed? Well, it had, I had. And then, just as I was feeling on top of the world, feeling so secure in this new life I'd built, my world tilted on its axis again. I received a notice from Jason. It felt like a divorce filing. He had joined some other tiny house program, claiming it was just for investment. But the letter demanded that I either split the land with him or share the tax benefit. He wanted my parcel, my home, listed as joint property. I just sat there stunned. I was scheduled for a board meeting with the program administrators, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. I read his letter again. He claimed I had promised to share it with him. I felt my hands start to shake, my blood was boiling. All the fear from the storm was nothing compared to the anger I felt in that moment. I picked up my laptop and typed my response. 2 words. No, this is my life, my home, my future. I hit send. I was cutting ties for good this time. This wasn't just a piece of land or a house anymore. This was my declaration of independence, and I was ready to fight for it. Thank you so much for following my story. It's been a roller coaster, but sharing it with you all means the world to me. If you're enjoying this journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've done a proper sit-down chat, and today's story is, well, it's a big one. It's about losing pretty much everything and finding something I never expected in a place I never thought I'd be. As many of you know, my life took a sharp turn a while back. I was in a tough spot, feeling lost and overwhelmed. It was in that storm of emotion, that messy, chaotic period, that I finally got some clarity. I realized what I truly valued wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't about the job title or the city apartment or the life I was supposed to want. The things that screamed out to me were self-respect, autonomy, having a real community, and being my authentic self. And that's when this little house entered the picture. I know, the infamous $17,999 tiny house. A lot of you have asked about it. But this house, it was never just an escape plan. Looking back, I see now that it was a foundation. It was the first solid thing I could stand on when everything else felt like quicksand. I remember the first evening I spent here. I just stood watching the desert horizon turn all these incredible shades of pink and orange as the sun went down. It was so quiet, so vast. And in that moment, I felt the weight of the past start to fade away. It was like I could finally breathe, and the future, which had seemed like a closed door, suddenly felt wide open with possibilities. It's funny how life works. Once I started settling in, something unexpected happened. I started connecting with other people who were in similar situations. I found myself mentoring other recipients of these tiny homes, Young women who reminded me so much of myself just a few months earlier, freelancers who'd lost all their clients overnight, people who had been laid off and were trying to figure out what was next. It started small. I hosted a few virtual sessions from my little living room, just sharing my story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I was honest about the fear and the uncertainty, and I watched as they started to move into their own places. I saw their same fears, and I got to cheer for their successes. It was incredible. I realized I wasn't just building a home for myself anymore. I was building a purpose. So, where am I now? A few nights ago, I was sitting right here on my porch just like this. It was a cool evening. The sky was absolutely packed with stars. You just don't see them like this in the city. I had a warm mug of coffee in my hands and I was just thinking, life is so full of surprises, isn't it? It can knock you down in ways you never see coming. But I've learned that love, in its many forms, will always lead the way forward. And I'm not just talking about romantic love. I'm talking about the love you have for yourself, the love for the people who believed in you when you couldn't, and the love for the community you build from the ground up. That's the real stuff. Before I sat down to film this, I glanced at my solar monitor. It read, power generated today, 76%, battery full, wind calm. It's a small thing, but seeing that, knowing that I'm self-sufficient, that I'm creating my own power, it just made me smile. It's a metaphor for everything, really. And right then, my phone rang. It was my mom. The first thing she said was, "So, when are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" We have this conversation a lot. I just laughed and said, "Actually, I was thinking I'll fly you out here this year." I could hear her smile through the phone. And then I said something I've wanted to say for a long time. "Mom, thank you. Thank you for pushing me." She was quiet for a second and then she said, "Honey, I didn't push you. You pushed yourself." And hearing her say that, it just hit me. She was right. I did. I did this. So, here's the final punchline, the big takeaway from this whole crazy journey. In the end, that $7,990 tiny house wasn't just a bargain find on the internet. It was the launch pad for my entire new life. The house didn't save me. It gave me the space and the stability to save myself. And now, I'm building something so much bigger than these four walls. I'm building a community. I'm building a future. And that's what can happen when you feel like you've lost everything. You make space to find something new. Something that is truly your own. Something sustainable, something real. Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of this journey with me. It means the world. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, what's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? Let's share some of that strength. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of this new chapter. I'll see you in the next one.